My name's Mark Sivills. I'm an AST at Don College, and I teach maths primarily. Where we were in 2012 was we had very successful high-end. We had a median ATAR of 80 plus over the last 5 years. But we weren't getting the same results out of our level 2, our foundation maths classes. In 2012 we had a 60% pass rate with 77% completion. And we felt we needed to do better. Now, at the same time, in 2013, we started a teacher learning community based on the work of Dylan William, and we started to use a lot of formative assessment techniques across maths, but a lot of this was happening primarily at the higher levels. One of the most effective things that we used was something called a double deadline. So we had our first deadline where students were set an assignment, they brought it in, they self-assessed according to completion using a rubric. This was subsequently confirmed by the teacher, and then students were given a checklist with which they could look at someone else's work. And then they would go back, sit with their partner, and then one by one, going through those questions, spend about another 15 minutes feeding back to each other on all the things that they had done well, the things that were missing, the things they needed to do to improve their work. Then they'd get about another 10 or 15 minutes to continue working and improving their work, and maybe 2 days later they would submit it for a second deadline. Teachers found that the quality of the work went through the roof. It was fantastic. Also, the quality of the discussion and the dialogue in the classroom was fantastic. Where students previously hadn't really talked to each other or worked terribly well together before, they would just go over and say, yeah, you need to improve that. Are you okay with that? And then walk off. Now they would be spending time discussing in detail what each other had to do to improve. And then we decided to do it with workplace maths. So our workplace maths, our foundation course, there was a lot of reluctance among the teachers to do this stuff. There was a kind of belief that the students wouldn't be able to engage with that kind of high-level thinking and discussion, but we found that they were. So we trialled it with 3 different groups. The first group essentially did their standard assignment, looked at some solutions for it, did a little bit of revision, did a test, and that was it. The second group, we used the double deadline, and the third group, in addition to using the double deadline, did this kind of post-assignment action activity where they designed questions for each other and then helped each other to solve them. The results then, when we compared them, the control group was just flat, indicating there was a similar level of difficulty. The group that did a partial formative assessment cycle improved by about 1/3 of a grade on average, and the group that had engaged in the designing questions activity improved on average by 1/2 a grade. So this is an enormous, highly significant improvement. We used that information then to inform our teaching for 2015. These processes have now been embedded into what we do, into the fabric of how we design our year plan, our scope and sequence, and each teacher is now doing this for every unit.
Our presentation today was based around its ownership of assessment in the hands of the student. So that's the evidence base that we used was some inside SRC data about students thinking about how their learning is going and how they are enabled to action upon their own learning process.
So in our school environment, because students self-direct their own learning a lot of the time, we had to come up with another form of assessment. So we used Google Docs for assessment.
So we use Google Docs to do reflections from the teacher as a check-in and reflections from the student. So we're giving feedback from teacher, student, and also from their peers.
So the thinking behind it is that we co-own and co-author the learning process and the documentation of learning, rather than the ownership of what's going on just being in the teacher's mind or on the teacher's paper, so that it's a truly shared document and parents view this as well. Our future thinking is that we might actually also have a parent column brought into it so that they can think about also reflecting on their students' learning and what they're saying about their learning at home as well.